The question of whether Amelia Earhart survived her disappearance is one of the most enduring mysteries of the 20th century. Nearly a century later, the answer remains unresolved, but the evidence we have today allows us to say something important with clarity. There is no confirmed proof that Amelia Earhart survived long term after her plane disappeared. There is also no confirmed proof that she died immediately. What we have instead is a narrowing set of possibilities, shaped by decades of investigation, recovered records, forensic analysis, and modern technology. Amelia Earhart vanished in July of 1937 during her attempt to fly around the world. She and navigator Fred Noonan were last heard from while approaching Howland Island, a tiny speck of land in the Pacific Ocean. Despite an enormous search effort by the U.S. Navy, no wreckage was found at the time. For years, the prevailing explanation was simple. Earhart ran out of fuel and crashed into the ocean. That conclusion was logical given what was known then, but it was not supported by physical evidence. No debris was recovered. No confirmed crash site was identified. As decades passed, new theories emerged. The most widely discussed alternative is known as the Nikumaroro hypothesis. According to this theory, Earhart and Noonan did not crash into deep ocean water. Instead, they may have landed on or near a remote island then called Gardner Island, now known as Nikumaroro, part of the Republic of Kiribati. Supporters of this theory point to several pieces of circumstantial evidence. Radio distress calls were reportedly heard by civilians and military stations in the days following the disappearance. These calls suggested that Earhart's plane was intact long enough to transmit messages, something that would not have been possible if it had sunk immediately. On Nikumaroro, later expeditions found artifacts that could plausibly be linked to Earhart's era, including fragments of aluminum, improvised tools, and personal items consistent with a female castaway. In 1940, British colonial officials also reported finding partial human remains on the island. At the time, the remains were poorly analyzed and later lost, but measurements taken then were re examined decades later. Modern forensic analysis of those measurements suggests the bones were more consistent with a woman of Earhart's height and build than with a male. That finding did not prove identity, but it challenged earlier assumptions. More recently, DNA analysis of environmental samples and recovered objects has been attempted, though no definitive genetic match to Earhart has been confirmed. Oceanographic modeling has also been used to study drift patterns, helping researchers evaluate where wreckage or remains might have traveled. Despite these efforts, there is still no conclusive evidence. There are also theories suggesting Earhart was captured by Japanese forces and held as a prisoner. These claims have circulated for decades and are often supported by anecdotal testimony or misidentified photographs. However, no credible Japanese military records or independent documentation confirm this scenario. Modern historians generally regard the capture theory as unsupported. What has changed in recent years is not the conclusion, but the framing. Most serious researchers now agree on one point. Amelia Earhart almost certainly did not survive long term. There is no evidence she lived years or decades after her disappearance. There are no verified sightings, communications, or records that support that idea. The more realistic question is whether she survived for days or weeks after landing somewhere remote. On that question, the Nikumaroro hypothesis remains plausible but unproven. If Earhart did land on a remote island, she would have faced extreme conditions: limited fresh water, intense heat, injury, isolation. Without rescue, survival would have been short lived. That possibility does not diminish her legacy. In many ways, it deepens it. Amelia Earhart was not just a symbol of aviation, she represented persistence, courage, and the willingness to challenge limits in an era when both technology and societal expectations were unforgiving. Her disappearance became part of that story, not because it added drama, but because it highlighted the risks she knowingly accepted. The latest information we have does not confirm survival. It does not confirm immediate death. It confirms uncertainty. That uncertainty is why the mystery persists. Technology continues to advance. Deep sea exploration, satellite imaging, and forensic science may one day provide an answer, but until physical evidence is recovered and verified, the question remains open, constrained by probability rather than proof. What we can say with confidence is this: Amelia Earhart did not disappear into legend because of what she might have survived. She endures because of what she attempted, what she achieved, and how she changed the world's understanding of who could take part in exploration. Whether her final days were brief or prolonged, her impact was lasting. And until evidence tells us otherwise, the most honest answer to the question of her survival is not speculation, but respect for the limits of what we know. The mystery remains unresolved, not because it has been ignored, but because it has been studied carefully and still resists certainty.